Thanks for staying with us. The murder-suicide of a mother and her children in the Eastern Cape has raised so many questions about their circumstances and the events surrounding that eventual tragedy. The woman reportedly woke her children up in the early hours of September the 11th while they were staying with their grandmother. She apparently took them to the forest, made them eat poison before hanging herself. 3 of the children, aged 14, 9 and 3, died and one survived by playing dead. The girl and 11-year-old is in hospital in a serious condition after alerting neighbours to this particular tragedy. Let's now speak to Lebo Ramafoko, CEO of the Tekano Fellowship, who's joining us live now. Lebo, it's a horrific story, and we've heard some of these stories before. One thinks about the Northwest, the other one thinks about exactly in the Eastern Cape as well. Such, really, really brutal ways to die. And I wonder, what was your reaction and the questions you have when you're reading such stories?
Thank you so much for having me. And just a minor correction, I'm the Executive Director of Oxfam South Africa. And one of the areas that we work on, no problem. One of the areas that we work on is about the eradication of poverty and inequality. And the Eastern Cape is one area that we are working in. And let me just convey my deepest condolences to the family, particularly the surviving sibling and the grandmother, who are probably making sense of such a tragic event. I am very sad to say that I am not surprised that this is taking place, because the levels of hunger in South Africa, coupled with the rise in food prices, partly fueled by the war in Ukraine, and the aftermath of COVID, are putting a lot of families into such desperate situations.
And
what does this mean?
Pardon me, Lebo. Are we responding adequately, though?
That's exactly the point. We do not have the ability to respond. A lot of NPOs and NGOs are responding. For an example, some of the partners we work with in the Eastern Cape are struggling on their own to open food soup kitchens, like we saw that happened across the country with COVID. But I think, generally speaking, our provincial and local government does not have the kind of capacity to firstly identify families at risk. And we are very reactive. We will come and pledge our allegiance when there is a funeral to bury the dead, but we don't apply as much care when people are hungry. So part of what we are seeing in the Alfred Nzo District Municipality is the fact that, for an example, we were meeting this weekend, the community is, and that is mainly women, are asked to develop backyard gardens, which is a good way of responding. But the local government and provincial government is able to give one family 5 seedlings, while we are giving them a bale of seedlings. You can see that even when we think that there is an intervention that can be done, our response to that intervention is very inadequate. The second thing is we are not appointing and we have not been able to pay attention to mental health, and October is Mental Health Month. Clearly, this woman, this mother, has been struggling for quite a long time, and we do not even have community-based or auxiliary social workers who are getting into families and they are linking them with help that is available. That is another way in which you can identify families that are in distress. It means that at the school, while we are spending money on feeding schemes, there is no capacity at the school with any other psychosocial support to investigate in children's lives, what is happening in their families, who do they stay with. We do know that in South Africa, we have left old women, as in grandmothers, to use their very meager old age pension to look after children. So all of these things point to the fact that while there are laws and provisions to act, we do not have people that are capable to act, or we do not have sufficient people to act on time. And that is the cry whenever you go across South Africa. Let me hasten to say, this happens within a pandemic where companies are throwing away food in large proportions. So the problem is not the unavailability of food, it's the systems that we have. I participated in another show on SABC where we were talking about the laws that are even preventing markets, vegetable markets, to then distribute the food between the food that don't make it to the market, that are not market ready, to a number of NPOs and families. And for that reason, we have partnered with One Farm Share, an organization that was started within COVID, to take the oversupply of produce from farmers who could not supply restaurants because of lockdown, and then distribute them to the kind of NPOs that may have helped this family. What happened is that we did it in the Eastern Cape, but we are one NGO. This is partnerships that the state should be making. And unfortunately, nobody's going to be held accountable. That is my sentence.
And you know, you talk about something very critical, identifying it in the communities. And I'm thinking about a story that a colleague of mine in the Eastern Cape, you know, ran with here on the channel, of a teacher who was able to pick up that these are children and they were not coming to school. And when they would come, their uniform was dirty and something was amiss. Eventually, we saw the MEC of Education going there in the Eastern Cape, supporting the family and finding that the mother is actually bedridden. And the children were staying home to be able to take care of the mother. And these are some of the stories that are taking place. And I wonder, when we talk about this diagnosis, and as you say, that there is no ability to do this, is it a resource issue for the state? Or is there something else at play here that they simply do not know where to begin?
I think it's a skill issue. It's a creativity issue. It's a thinking outside of the box issue. And it is an accountability issue. If you and I were going to bed to knowing that somebody is going to be held accountable for the death of the children in the Eastern Cape, I think we would sleep better. Because we would know that we've got a government where people are held responsible when such preventable death is taking place. I gave you an example where one of our partners, Farmers Network South Africa, was telling us that although backyard gardens have been identified, the government is giving families 5 seedlings, while in partnership with Oxfam South Africa, we are able to give them a bale of seedlings. It does tell you that the idea that we've recognized the problem is not, I mean, the fact that we've recognized the problem exists, but how we are dealing with it, either people do not have capacity, and we do know that across municipalities, across all areas of service delivery, we basically do not give people the kind of support that they need, but also we don't appoint the people who can do the support. But I am hastening to say that because women on the whole, we even call them mbogodo in this ill-fated Women's Month, have taken on this, and grandmothers have done this, I don't think that there is a full appreciation that families are in distress. We are also not a government that is pro-poor, no matter what we say in our in our utterances. We are a very a neoliberal government. We know what corruption has done when even emergency funds are taken and are sent into communities. And I wish, for an example, organizations like One Farm Share that are collecting the food and making sure that the food doesn't go to waste, they are supported more. I wish that the creativity that we found in the Eastern Cape are put in place. I wish that somebody would go and understand and assess how the food school system is happening. We've put teacher assistants in classrooms. I'm eager to know how many are in rural areas. What skills do they have to be able to support the kind of families that are in distress? I'm really curious about all of those things because we need to be very practical. We know how to do these things. We have the funds to do these things. We don't have accountability. We don't have ability. And we are not appointing at very key and crucial positions people that will know how to turn a very difficult process given post-COVID realities and given the effects on the war on Ukraine. And unfortunately, because they are poor, we will let them to die because we are not a pro-poor government. And the lives of Black people, particularly Black women, are dispensable in this country in 2024. In 2023, unfortunately.
And it's very sad, especially when you think about some of the factors that even drive them over the edge. You think about the fact that right now, we still talk about some of those who have not even received their social grants. So some of them are not even getting adequate support. So there's quite a lot to talk about. And I hope, Oslebo, we get to speak again about this, because in the coming days, we're going to be focusing on this crisis that is also compounded by people not receiving their social grants, and thus, in some instances, being pushed over the edge. But thank you so much for that, Oslebo. Do appreciate it. That is Lebo Ramafoko. She's the Executive Director of Oxfam SA.